March 15, 2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mrs. Kasper? Here. Dr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Kocher? Here. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Nigrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Stand for the posting of the colors.
March. Forward. March. Mark time. March. Colors. Halt. Left. Face. Sir, permission to post colors. Post colors. Present arms.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order arms. Reverse colors. March. Right, face. Mark time. March. Forward. March.
Mr. Moravich, we do not have any public participation on agenda items. There is now. Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Carroll? Oh,
Sorry, do not have anything.
you may. Go ahead.
May I be relieved of then giving instructions on public participation? Okay.
So there's none.
There is none, yes.
Oh, great. Any communications?
No.
Under approval minutes, looking to request approval for the minutes of the school board meeting held on March 1st, 2021 as attached. Looking for a motion?
McCray.
Mr. McCray first. Do we have a second?
Kasper.
Mrs. Kasper, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Treasurer's report, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight the Treasury report, the investment report, the general fund and capital funds financial reports.
Thank you. Looking for a second? Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval payment of bills out of the general fund, $1,813,723.67. And out of the 2019 A construction fund, $695,511.
Thank you. Looking for a second? Mr. Nigrini, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Financial reports, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval, these are all for February, the cafeteria report, the child care report, the Southern Middle School, Wilson West Middle School, and the senior high reports.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Mr. Nigrini, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report. Dr. Faidley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, I present the superintendent's report, personnel and program recommendations for board consideration. I would like to acknowledge one retirement that's on the agenda this evening. Jocelyn Moyer, Family and Consumer Science teacher at the high school, effective the end of this school year, with 18 years of service to the Wilson School District. I commend her for her service and wish her well in her next phase of life.
Great. Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve superintendent's items 6.1 through 6.6 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy. Any discussion? Dr. Kennedy?
First of all, I want to say that Mrs. Moyer was when I very first started teaching, she was an aide in my class when her boys still went to Whitfield, and I loved watching her journey to decide to go back to work here at school, at the high school, and she was just lovely, and she'll be missed. But when I was reading the superintendent's report tonight, and I'm sorry I haven't said this out loud before because I think we probably should say it a lot more. I was looking at the list of coaches, and all the coaches, I know a lot of the coaches have coached my children, and I just was sitting there this afternoon thinking, wow, like there are hundreds of hours worth of coaching in that list, and I think we forget that. You know, even though some of our coaches are paid, I think it's probably pennies on the hour with the time commitment that it is to coach our kids. And having a child who is not academically interested, coaching for him and having great coaches is so very important for him to do his best in school because he really, you know, sports is really his motivation. And I think sometimes we forget. You know, I look at this list and think that there's people on this list that have spent hundreds or thousands of hours with my child at practice and coaching and doing great things. And there's a bunch of volunteer coaches on here, and the time commitment is just crazy. And it's not easy. You know, 95% of the parents are just lovely and grateful and thankful that you're coaching with your kid. But then you have those parents that, you know, will question the coach and complain about playing time and, you know, berate coaches for not playing them. And that's, you know, something that comes with the job. And, you know, I just want to thank not just these coaches on this list, but all of our coaches for all of the sports, even all of our youth sports, because it's quite the commitment.
Any other discussion or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under consent items, 7.1, request to accept with gratitude the following donations from Capital Blue Cross, a check for $1,500 to be used for increasing health and wellness safety measures in the district. Looking for a motion?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do we have a second? Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call. Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Under Human Resources, 8.1, request approval of the WEA 2021 through 2023 collective bargaining agreement as attached. Looking for a motion?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? Mr. Martin?
Yes. I have a few comments to make. I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess it up. I wrote it like 12 different times, so thank you. All too often, we as a board have a short memory. If you recall last spring, we were looking at a significant financing crisis. We asked all parties, the support staff, the administration team, and the teachers to consider a pay freeze until we could understand the impact of COVID. We have We had, excuse me, we had a trying time during that period. We had a budget crisis, we had community concerns, we had senior citizens as well as our student concerns. We were hoping for support by the teachers to help us in this transition period until we understood what COVID was about. The support staff and the Mennonites team eagerly stepped forward to help, but not the teachers. They had a contract which required a salary increase, and that was the end of the conversation. Several of the board members, as well as the superintendent, were concerned about that lack of consideration and the way it was handled by the teachers. All we was asking was to hold off until we could get a handle on the financial crisis to make educated decisions. Many small businesses were closed, some closed and are continuing to close. However, the sad part is I know several of those businesses personally that have been in business for over 20 years and now have shuttered their doors. Well, my memory isn't so short. I'm scratching my head wondering why we want to approve an increase 150% above CPI. I don't blame the board's negotiation committee, as under PA law, the hands are pretty much tied as well as all boards. What I believe was a fair increase would have been 2%, which would have helped our budget going forward. It was my understanding that with the impact of COVID that there would be some community help and support for these particular projects with the teachers, but unfortunately I did not see that coming together, and I'm very disappointed with this process. As you know, we're spending about $750,000 more than we should, well, it depends on who you talk about. I think what we should have over 2%. And that will only compound itself down the road and continue to compound itself forever. Finally, over the next 5 years, unless something drastically changes, we're looking at an increase in taxes, real estate taxes, of about 25%. Of this, 75% goes to benefits as well as to salaries. For these reasons, I'm not in support of this, and thank you for your time.
First and a second. Any other discussion? Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin? Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
And Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
I just want to thank the WA leadership and negotiation team for working with Mrs. Kocher and Mr. Nigrini to come together for a common goal to move this forward. So thank you to all parties that were involved. 8.2 will be taken by itself. 8.2, we're looking for rest approval for the addition of a full-time school social worker position at the elementary level. Looking for a motion? Mrs. Kocher first, Mrs. Kasper second. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Martin.
Yes. I'm having a tough time with adding a social worker to the school when there's hundreds of agencies out there that can provide the services. Hiring just one social worker, I'm not sure is even going to impact it. And I'm not sure why this would be on the collective bargaining agreement, because I only think we have a salary step for such a person. As you know, social workers are not that expensive, so I'm not sure where this falls in with that. So why couldn't this be on like a support staff position?
Dr. Faidley, would you like to address that? Or have...
I will address it. It is part of our collective bargaining agreement. We do have a social worker in our school system. That actually have 2 of them who work currently in our school system. As the board knows and understands, there have been a lot of issues as a result of some of the concerns that have been brought forward from the pandemic, as well as prior to the pandemic, of students accessing services and being prepared socially, emotionally for the learning experience. Upon the recommendation of Dr. Hart bringing this forward to the Human Resources Committee, it was felt that this was a critical position moving forward to meet those needs of our youngest learners so that they could come to school and have someone to support them and their families and access the learning environment. It has been long overdue in the Wilson School District as our demographic population has shifted, and it's something that we present as a significant need, and that's why it's on the agenda this evening.
I guess the question is, why cannot we use all the social services that are available?
The job of a social worker is to work with families, to connect the families to services, to work with students that are struggling emotionally, socially, in connecting to school. And unfortunately, we have a significant need in our school system. We do have services currently through Concern. We have services through our 2 full-time social workers that work within our school district. And the reason why we're adding this position is because those services are not meeting the needs of our students. We need someone to connect with our earliest learners, and it's something that we have worked through as an administrative team to identify what would best meet our needs. As the board hears our staffing requests for 21-22, you'll see an additional emphasis placed on our students' emotional and social health. You'll see an additional emphasis placed on counseling, because that's the environment that the Wilson School District is in at the present time, and we do have those needs in our school district. So we do access agency services through Concern. That was something we implemented last year that we will continue to utilize, but we need some more attention and direct services to our youngest students.
Speak from experience. When I had my first child, everyone knows my first child had pretty heavy-duty special needs, and he spent a lot of time in the NICU. And for me, next to the amazing NICU nurses, the most important people were the 2 social workers that they provided to the families in the NICU. Because when you're in the middle of a crisis, being able to figure out your way throughout the system is nearly impossible. The system's not easy to figure out around on a good day. And, and I have many college degrees, and I'm a teacher, so I have to step up. But for regular families, just even knowing what's out there or knowing who to ask is really difficult. And to have a centralized person in the elementary school that can help families through crisis situations like this and connect them to the services, I think that's what we have to do as a school district, because until our children's basic needs are met, they're not going to be learning anything.
One of the other things that I could add is in recent years, there's been a lot of emphasis on student trauma in the home and the experiences that students have prior to coming to school. Those experiences that happen, and they are a wide variety of things that can happen, impact their ability to learn. And until you can unlock some of those things, children are not going to progress. And part of the job of a social worker is to look and to identify the students that are in those categories and to work with them and their families to provide them strategies so that the students can be successful moving forward.
Any other comments, discussion? We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cray? Yes. Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
And Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
8.3, request approval for the addition of a full-time special education supervisor position. 8.4, request to approve the employees for specialized leave under the FFCRA to ensure P's or years of service credits are maintained. 8.5, Request approval of the transportation safety and attendance stipend as attached. 8.6, request approval of after-school elementary tutors as listed. Looking to approve human resource items 8.3 through 8.6 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first, do you have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Kasper, any discussion?
Why is Whitfield not on the list of the tutors?
Why is Whitfield not on the list for tutors?
It says 10 people, but 2 are missing. May have just been cut off.
There are 2.
So it's the approval of 10.
Yes,
whether or not
it's
we
actually
fill
Mr. Cross
those.
and Mr. Shaw. And Whitfield, I'm not sure what happened that they got cut off, but yes, there are 2 there.
So that we will be approving 10, including the 2 at Whitfield. Any other comments or discussion?
Just for my own seeking of understanding, can you help me understand a little bit the special ed supervisor? Later in the agenda, there's going to be a behavior support person, and just the balance of my understanding that we struggle to get special education aides in classrooms, and whether this is going to be, I'm sure there's a need. I'd just like to understand a little bit more from whether it's top-heavy of people in the office pushing papers or actually in the classroom helping students, and where the balance is. I'm not in the classroom every day, but it just seems like we're getting more into the management of special education.
So specifically discussing the special ed supervisor first, part of the job of the special ed supervisor is to ensure compliance within the organization so that the federal regulations are adhered to, the individual education plans that are developed within compliance of state statute, so that when we get audited by the federal government and the state, that we're in compliance with those issues. In addition, they work diligently to make sure that the plans that are developed are adhered to, that we are able to work through issues with families. One of the results of not having things compliant is due process and the expense related to due process hearings and litigation associated with that. So the primary focus of the special ed supervisor is to make sure that all of those things are adhered to. In reference to the out-of-district coordinators, there are, and the behavior specialists, there are student populations that exist that we need a specialized person to work with our staff to develop behavior plans, to work through some of our most difficult students and developing those plans to keep them in district so that we don't have to send them to specialized schools that cost an extraordinary amount to send them to. And then finally, the out-of-district coordinator, the position that is being vacated by Art Morris, that position is to make sure that the logistics are taken into account when we do have those students that we cannot serve in the Wilson School District, to make sure that their IEPs are compliant, that we're paying what we should be paying, and transportation and all of those functions are set up, and they attend all of those meetings, and there are quite a few of those. So it's kind of just a little bit of a background. They're really boots on the ground positions, which I would say, and I would say that they're not technically administrative positions. They're more of compliance and assisting types of positions to help teachers in the classroom.
You may.
Mr. Case does bring up a good point. In order to have a truly successful special education department. I think it's the right balance and support top to bottom. And it does bring up some recurring themes about making sure that we have enough support within the classroom. Sometimes those teachers in there managing, the cases that they have can sometimes be a challenge, and whether or not we're getting that extra support that they need from an administrative position, whether we have the support needed from aides, whether or not we need to hire, an additional special education teacher. I think this is a process that we always have to continue to evaluate, because as we know, through, every month there seems to be a discussion about a potential, due process issue that can be very, very expensive to litigate and or settle. And it's, obviously better served if we can pay for an additional position that may allow for the district to avoid those potential pitfalls that come down the road, that everybody, in the department, top to bottom, is doing what they need to do. They feel supported, so that we're providing the best possible, special education plan for our students. So, point well received, and I'm sure the administration is looking at whether or not we need to fill other positions in the classroom.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? HR items 8.3 through 8.6. Roll call, please.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
And Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 9.1, request approval of the following revised job descriptions as attached. Special Education Supervisor, Registered School Nurse. 9.2, request approval of the following new job descriptions for current district positions as attached. Out of District Coordinator and Behavior Specialist. Looking for a motion to approve items 9.1 through 9.2 as presented. Mr. McCray first. Do you have a second? Mrs. Kasper, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Technology, 10.1, request approval of a new 60-month lease agreement for Ricoh C3000 multifunction copier from Stratix Systems. Looking for a motion? Mr. Schneider first. Do we have a second? Mr. Case, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 11.1, request to authorize administration to engage Crabtree, Rohrbach, and Associates to continue the design development phase of architectural services for the comprehensive additions and renovations for Wilson High School. Looking for a motion? Mr. Nigrini first. Do you have a second? Mr. Case, any discussion? Mr. Martin?
My discussion really just centers around the estimated cost. I believe we should let the folks know, and it goes back to the emails that you've been seeing going back and forth. I think anytime we're looking at something and we're approving to move forward, we should notify, at least let the public know that we're looking at between $40 and $45 million for such a project. I think that's important, and it's my understanding that announcement will be going out tomorrow. I think it would be appropriate, even though they're estimates, we discussed these estimates, we're making a decision on these estimates, that we should include those in any discussion with the public. And if you want to tag it to other areas, sure, feel free to tag it. But I think it's important that the public understands that, not hide it and that you have to go to find it, but to put it out front. I support this, but I just want people to be able to access that up front at one spot. That's it.
Any other comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
11.2, request to authorize administration to proceed with acquiring all municipal and/or state permits and approvals for the construction of baseball fields and softball fields on the Wilson High School campus as per option 5 field design and cost estimate. Furthermore, to authorize the administration to engage professional design services and to proceed with all completion of the project. The documents will be subject to final solicitor review and approval. Looking for a motion. Mr. Nigrini first. Do we have a second? Mr. Case second. Any discussion?
Not so much discussion, but questions. Do we have, so my main question and concern with not the project itself, because I think that it is appropriate to bring the varsity baseball field team back to the high school campus. And this plan would create another baseball field, which there are 3 teams for 1 field currently, so obviously that's appropriate. My concern is with the addition of the turf to both the baseball and softball fields. So my question is, the approval here is to go out for bid, permits and any approvals that we need from municipal or state entities. So my question is, in addition to that, are we going to be requesting any environmental tests or any ground tests that would kind of give us an insight into what the structure looks like and what kind of underground situation we're dealing with, whether it's limestone, which could cause further sinkholes that we've had a problem with on the high school campus. So I'm just wondering if there's any sort of tests that are done to kind of give us a heads up before the project starts so that we're not putting a giant tank of water into ground that is already possibly a dangerous situation with the limestone and just make it further of an issue. So I don't know if we have anybody that can answer that.
Come forward and address that. That's more technical than I am, so I'll let you answer that.
Typically, what the first phase in trying to get this approved is to go out and make sure that we can build because we have lights, we have variances, we have zonings to do. Then K&W Environmental Group, who was actually one of the ones that put the package together, would come in and do an environmental study, much the same as what we just did up at the high school. So ground penetrating radar, some geotechnical borings, finding out the land development plan, phase 1 environmental, all that goes into the package that we would have to get done before we build. What we're looking to do right now is sort of walk before we run and be able to get township and state approvals that we can do what we want to do. So if we can do all the testing in the world, but if we can't do what we want to do, it's lost money. So this is sort of step 1 for step 2. All of that has to go into the program before we build anything. And one of the things I've been saying pretty much for the last couple of years is that I want to make sure that we do not put any underground water storage under turf. I don't know if you saw Mac, we just fixed a sinkhole there. It's dangerous in this area. It's typical, but I don't want to do it here. So if you look at the drawings, it actually shows underground water storage placed under grass areas where the turf would drain to that, and we wouldn't be storing the turf the water underneath the turf areas. That's the primary thing.
Because of the risk of further sinkholes, if we do that. So the base idea is we keep it under the grass field, so when we have the sinkholes, it's easier to fix than if it was under turf.
Easier, cheaper, all of the above. Yeah, because of the way a turf field is built with the gradations of stone, geotextile material, fine stone, grading, sand, the turf, it permeates water down through and then it collects underneath. That's sort of a holding tank, whereas in grass it goes in and permeates over the top, sheds, gets dispersed a little bit differently. And so what we want to do is make sure that if we're going to be susceptible to sinkholes at all, that they're not costly ones. I mean, the area is, we just fixed the last one. it costs thousands instead of tens or hundreds of thousands. But the turf is the most expensive aspect of it, peeling it back, re-gluing it, doing everything. So I've been adamant about that from day one. I really don't. When you're in Sinking Spring and Sinkhole Alley, you don't store water under turf.
Okay, and is the K&W environmental test, is that part of the budget that was already created?
Jeff Schick at K&W Environmental Group is the one that I put the package together with. So he's been involved in this from day one. So from the concept straight through and some of the changes, some of the redirection, from everywhere from a $2 million to basically a $10 million project, K&W has been an integral part of the whole thing.
Right, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, but the price to have them do all of the testing is included in our budget that we were given, right?
It is.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so is there anything in the testing, the ground penetrating radar and everything that they're going to do, that if they detect anything specific that would not allow us to do the turf due to an increased risk of sinkholes?
I don't believe, in fact, I'm pretty much sure they're not going to find anything that would preclude us from doing it, but we just have to use best practices knowing the area we're in. Ground penetrating radar went through the entire first part there just to make sure that it's feasible to continue on with the design, to make sure that some of our infrastructure wasn't forgotten about. It's a very busy area up here at the high school. There's a lot of things in there that there's no as-bills for. So we now have as-bills on that. So I'm confident moving forward with the addition in the Performing Arts Center is now feasible. I want to do the same thing with the fields.
But they would tell us, they would say, this is a bad idea to put turf, you should put.
I don't know that, I've told them it's a bad idea to put turf in with conventional drainage systems. I think we know this area more. Some of the geological reports, the geotechnical borings we had, they confirmed everything that I've been fixing here for the past 40 years.
To
So,
answer the question, ground penetrating radar does not detect sinkholes. That's not its intent.
no, it does not. No, the test borings and geological.
There's no way that ground penetrating radar, you can use it, it doesn't work. We've used it many times and sinkholes do develop. And just because the water's off-site does not mean a sinkhole won't occur. So don't give yourself false hope that just because the water's moved off-site, it's not going to.
Right, but what we can do is try to, and it's no
Mitigate, I
guarantee,
understand.
that we can shift it into a grass area. We've got to do something with the water. That particular area where the field concept is gone out, there's no room in municipal capacities for any stormwater. The old Whitfield floods, there's no infrastructure in there. What they do have is very weak along Penn Avenue. It's dated, it's old. If we induce any more water into that, we could end up, which is part of the study for permitting, being a part of having to increase all of the infrastructure there. It would be cost prohibitive. So the main design is to keep all of our water back on our site right as it is now and not shed or put anything into the township system or roadways.
So the main concept is the water drains off of the two turf fields over to an underground storage tank under grass, like further towards the corner of St. Albans? Burke's Place. And then slowly penetrates out into the ground there.
Well, actually, it seeps down through the turf and through the various layers of stone, let's just say 24 inches thick. Then it gets caught in collector pipes and would go over into larger pipes that would be underground, under the grass areas. So you shed the water over to there, and then it permeates into the subsoils at that point, which, I'm not going to say would cause a sinkhole, but the conditions we have there, we just want to make sure that we don't have to, we do everything possible to not have it under turf areas. So, I mean, we can't shed it off. In a perfect world, we could pipe it off into the field, the extra 15 acres in field next door, and let it drain and seep in slowly. We don't have that luxury right now with where we're at.
Okay, so and would this drainage issue be the same if we decided to go with grass fields instead?
It's slightly different because you get more of a sheet flow and surface shed on grass, and it permeates into the top. So you're not letting it to go down through collecting it and then transferring it somewhere. It kind of goes into the whole infrastructure over the whole footprint. I don't know that I would really say that, I'd be foolish to say that one is more conducive of sinkholes than the other, but it's a different scenario between the two.
Okay, because I'm just, so I looked back through our email records that I had, and in the last, actually 3 years, actually 2 years. So I have one from July 2019, we had a large sinkhole in the lower house, which I believe was from a burst pipe, which is not necessarily our fault.
Well, that was actually from a filled infrastructure pipe that was done during a construction project prior, and I'm going to say, true sinkholes, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is the sinkhole there waiting for an envelope to open up, or do certain infrastructure, man-made things, natural occurrences, heavy rains, do they cause sinkholes? Failed infrastructure may cause a sinkhole, but it's not truly a sinkhole. A sinkhole, just by a geological formation and what happens, is something that would just happen to an open field where the formations just align, the stars align, and the ground gets taken down with the surface structure. So it's probably not real decisive as to what you're going to, what you call a sinkhole and what you call failed infrastructure, poor drainage, poor design. A lot of different things go into it.
Okay.
At the end of the day, though, it's a sinkhole.
It was a big hole.
It's
right?
a big hole.
We had to fill, yeah. And then one in this past June on Dwight Street. It may have been technically off of our campus, but it's the same general area. This past July 1st then, behind the lower house, and then this past week and a half at Macfield. So my point is, with this, the addition and the addition of the turf structure and infrastructure that we have to add to allow turf to be our baseball and softball fields there, I am concerned that we are forcing a square peg into a round hole because we want it, and not necessarily that is an appropriate thing to do for that location. And the fact that we are moving the underground water tank to a specific area under grass because we're expecting sinkholes from it so that we can have a cheaper fix rather than having it under the turf just leads me to believe further that we know that sinkholes are going to happen. And your comment about Whitfield and that area naturally flooding, I don't think it's fair to the community that we add another stress to the infrastructure.
You can't.
Yeah, right.
That's
So
part of the township, that's part of the approvals. And I will say this, that when you look at that area, where the baseball fields are, baseball, softball fields down below, to my knowledge, I've fixed sinkholes all around the lower house in Gursky, all the way through Spring Township's properties, all the way over to 724. I don't know of any sinkholes that ever happened down on that area. That's a good sign. If I had been fixing sinkholes for the last 10 years in that area, you probably wouldn't get me to buy into the whole philosophy of the fields down there. I've never fixed one down there, and I'm not aware that there was ever one fixed down there. Therefore, I don't think that that's probably any worse choice than any place else on any of our properties. There's a reason why it's called Sinking Spring. I mean, this is where we are.
all right, thank you, Mr. Simcox.
All right, I'm coming from a little bit different angle. There will be a sinkhole. It's a matter of time, it's not when and where, but it will be a sinkhole. My concern is, I support the fields. I'm still have a very difficult time trying to justify why we need an artificial field when a baseball field, if done drainage correctly, can be played on almost as soon as an artificial field. No other school in Berks County has a complete artificial baseball field, and we always seem to be up in the ante, and I'm going to talk about this on the other business. We always seem to be pushing the envelope for other schools then to compete with Wilson. I'm not sure that's in the best interest of all the communities. I think, grass is fine, it's safer, it's more efficient, and people can play on it. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that you can't play on a grass field after it rains. None of it's done correctly. So I'm going to leave it go at that and move on. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Kocher?
No.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Kasper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
Under Finance, 12.1, request approval of the Berks Career and Technology Center General Fund for the 2021-2022 operating budget. 12.2, request approval to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to sign a natural gas supplier contract for the district for fiscal years beyond 2021. 12.3, request approval of the Business Information Group Incorporated software lease renewals for a mercantile business privilege tax collection. 12.4, request approval of the budget transfers dated February 11th, 2021 through March 10th, 2021 as attached. Looking for a motion to approve finance agenda items 12.1 through 12.4 as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, do we have a second? Mr. Nigrini, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kocher? Yes. Mr. Martin? Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Extracurricular, 13.1, request approval of the updated athletics and extracurricular health and safety plan as attached. Looking for a motion? Mrs. Cocker first, do you have a second? Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nigrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
First reading for about 7 policies as listed. We have the enrollment report under miscellaneous. Committee reports, Berks Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Kasper.
We did not meet. Our next meeting is March the 24th.
Wilson Equity Task Force, Mrs. Kasper.
Yes, we met on March 3rd in the admin building right here. We went over the data from the student surveys and the staff surveys together, and the administration came up with 4 areas around equity to frame our next action steps. Those are curriculum and professional development, policy, staffing and representation, and awareness activities and events. So during the meeting, we split into these respective groups by just self-selecting, and in each group, we addressed a couple of questions on how to move forward within that area. I thought it was a very productive meeting, and I like that I think all of these 4 areas seem very inclusive of areas around equity and issues around equity that we could address. One notable point I'd like to just mention is the attendance that we get at our meetings. It's always a new group of folks from a wide swath of representation from throughout the district. So I really appreciate that. And I think more and more folks should be coming and sharing their voice and their perspective on some of these issues. So I really appreciate that. So keep it coming. Other than that, that's my report. Our next meeting is April 7th at 3.
Berks County IU, Dr. Kennedy.
Yes, the Berks County IU meeting actually got moved completely online for this Thursday because they need all hands on deck because they are currently the vaccination point for every teacher in the entire Berks County. And today they had a visit from Governor Wolf who came to check out the vaccination clinic. And I wish instead of acquiescing to the legislature that Governor Wolf would have put Dr. Hackman in charge of vaccinating everyone in the whole Commonwealth because she is amazing and Her team at the IU is amazing, and I've heard just such wonderful things about that clinic and how it's operated and how it's been smooth sailing. And they got that 48 hours and then had it up and running. And they've done it from 2 to 9 so that teachers don't have to miss school. It's just been so well run, and I'm so proud of Dr. Hackman and her team, and proud to be on the BCIU board. So I look forward to hearing all about it at our meeting on Thursday.
Thank you. Curriculum Council.
Curriculum Committee, we 24. Thank you. We are meeting next Wednesday, the 24th, upstairs.
Thank you. Burke CIT, Mr. Schlossman. You're welcome. Extracurricular, Mrs. Kocher.
Yes, the Extracurricular Committee met last Monday, March 8th. And one of the items that we voted on this evening, reworking the health and safety plan, it pretty much just looked at the language that we had, that kind of is outdated now. It still had, red, yellow, and green phases. Remember that? There's just an update on the wording to make sure that what we're actually doing is in the hard copy. So we're following all the guidelines and procedures that are recommended, but we wanted our paperwork to be up to date to that. So that is my report.
Great, thank you. Finance, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, so we met last Monday, the 8th also. It was pretty non-eventful. We did talk about the general fund, the food service, childcare. Obviously, they've been impacted by COVID. They're struggling, but we hope the light's at the end of the tunnel for those. We discussed the capital fund balances, and it's not a pretty picture going forward, but depending on certain events that may occur with government funding, we may be able to squirrel some of that money away. Talked about some contracts that are coming up, which you will see in the near future. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't that jam-packed for that meeting.
Thank you. Facilities, Mr. Nigrini.
No report.
Human Resources, no report. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Oh, yes, hold on here. I got so many. Hold on here. Okay. Process stuff for. Okay. Basically, the big thing is the budget discussions going on right now with the state. One of the items on the budget is the concern about the 470,000 jobs that were lost due to COVID, and it's anticipated it's going to take 5 years to replace those jobs. So unemployment to a degree will continue to remain high in certain areas, more so in the cities versus some of the suburbs, which weren't quite impacted as much as some of the inner cities. One thing that they warned, they questioned the Director of Human Services, Teresa Miller, about her spending. It's way up this year, and they're cautioning anybody that's going to get federal funding not to use it for continuing operations. We went down this road a few years ago in 2008, 2009 when we got federal funding. We did not use it to fund operations. We used it to support other areas, because once that funding is gone, then you have a problem, because those areas may not be funded any further. So the senators warned about trying to increase employment through systems and so forth, but just put that money in a safe area that will not be a reoccurring expenses and use it for other items. The only other item was the small business relief package. It might be a little late for many of the small businesses, but they're looking at ways for small businesses to carry over some of the losses that have been generated. As you know, corporations can carry over loss forwards to help reduce future income, and small businesses, Schedule Cs, were not allowed to do that. And they're looking at to try to improve that so they can do that carry forward, carry back, hopefully to keep some of those still operating. But it's one of those things, it's like, barn doors open, everything's left. So it may help some, but several businesses have closed up. And the only other item, and I'm going to talk about this, their business, the fair share tax proposals that have been floating around. And like I said, I'm going to discuss that later under other business. But the only other item is minimum wage. There's a being proposed to increase the minimum wage in Pennsylvania to $10. There's pretty much support for that, so I would expect that will be, something that will be occurring in the near future. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening, everyone. So we've had quite a bit of Wilson good news over the past couple of weeks, so I'm just going to highlight a few items tonight for you all. First, we're very proud to announce that recently SHAPE PA's local chapter representing Lancaster, Lebanon, and Berks awarded Wilson teachers Kristen Hook and Liz Dugalecki with 2 of their highest honors for health and physical education teachers. Mrs. Hook received the D. Marion Frank Award for her service in the local SHAPE PA organization, in the school and district, in the community, and for those working behind the scenes to advance health and physical education and advocate for quality programming. And Dr. Dugalecki received the Charles Chick Hungerford Leadership Award in honor of her longstanding leadership and service to the health and physical education disciplines. So we really want to congratulate these 2 outstanding educators. Both of them have received multiple awards, so we continue to be very, very proud of both of them. We want to recognize and congratulate Sindora Sridhar of Wilson Southern Middle School, who was recently named the champion of the Diamond City Regional Spelling Bee, sponsored by Diamond City Sports. You remember that Sindora had won the Southern Spelling Bee just a couple of weeks ago, so she actually won this regional competition. So she's going to be competing in the 2021 Scripps National Spelling Bee. So we're very excited, and we wish her the best of luck at the national competition. We're also excited to announce that our middle school students had the opportunity to participate in Math Counts through a new virtual competition this year, so they shifted their entire competition online, and we're thrilled that Adi Nayak Akina Kazuka from West Middle School and Sindora Sridhar from Southern will be moving on to the state competition that will take place on March 25th. And we want to thank our Math Counts advisors, teachers Diane Collins and Chrissy Viscarello, for their continued support of our students in this competition. And then finally, we're excited that our Wilson Theater Company is going to be performing the musical mystery comedy Curtains. The performance will be held March 25th, 26th, and 27th at 7 p.m. each night in the Wilson High School Auditorium. And as they've been doing all season, they'll be performing both for a limited attendance live audience as well as unlimited tickets that you can purchase for the digital performance. And you can purchase all of those tickets on the Theater Company website. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
The Education Foundation is March 26th, 7:30 a.m.
Thank you.
That's it.
Technology, Mr. Schneider.
I have no report. Our next meeting is April 6th.
Okay. Student Outreach, Ms. Gianni Clark.
Marathon is hosting a car wash on March 21st from 12:30 to 4 p.m. at Fulton Bank in West Lawn. The club is also having a movie night on March 26th at 7:30 p.m. I think they're showing Toy Story, so please come out and support. Thank you to the buildings that have participated in a Dress Down Day to support Minithon. Across the district, the elementary and middle schools have supported Minithon's grand total, so we just want to thank all of the teachers for doing that. The Yoakum Institute for Arts Education is performing the show Dragons Love Tacos. The cast features 2 Wilson students, Paul Head, who attends Green Valley Elementary School, and Sabina Hauk, who attends Southern Middle School. The show opens this weekend. Tickets can be purchased on Yoakum's website for in-person and live streaming. Student government is running a plastic bag drive for the Opportunity House. The collected plastic bags will be used to make plarns, which are sleeping mats. Plastic bags can be dropped off at the upper house, the lower house, and gym entrances.
Thank you.
Can I say, Gianni, that I am really loving student government right now because, first of all, I am a plastic bag hoarder. I have, like, you would not believe, and every day I'm like, I really need to take these down Redner's, and they are coming to you now. But also, isn't student government running, it's your senior class, they're running a clothing drive soon, right? They're collecting clothing, and I just want to say out there for all the parents who have children who sleep on a bed that has no room because there's so many loveys on the bed, that they're not just collecting clothing and toys, they're collecting stuffed animals. So if any parents need any abductions to happen between now and April 10th, you can donate to the senior classes. They used to do a casino night, and now this is your fundraiser for that.
Yes, and it can be dropped off to the upper house office too. They asked to put it in a big trash bag if you have one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Can I make a couple comments?
You may.
I had the opportunity to watch our Wilson boys basketball team compete in the District 3 championship through live stream, and I want to commend the team for, number one, their season. As a former collegiate basketball scholarship athlete, I also want to commend their coach, because it's been a long time since I've seen a high school team as selfless as this team was. And they have, as you all know, they have a superstar on their team. But the reason why they got as far as they did is because of their team play, and Coach Coldren should be commended. Second, I want to highlight, I also had the opportunity to follow Josh Harkless in his 215-pound quest for the state championship wrestling. And if you were able to follow the news on Josh, his semifinal match went into overtime, and he had a takedown right at the end of the regulation of the overtime to move on to the finals. He came up short. He came in second, but I must commend him. My second son was a high school wrestler, and there's no other sport where you go into to competition and there's no place to hide when you get out there. So he is just a fine young man, and we're very proud of how far he went. We're proud of our boys. And then finally, I do know that our swimmers are excited. They're getting ready to take a shot to break some more records and perhaps bring back a state title for Wilson in swimming. So in addition to all of the fantastic students that were recognized this evening by Mrs. Troutman and Gianni, I wanted to do a shout out to all of those students as well. And say spring is here. I saw the tennis rackets going back and forth today, and the baseballers out there. So hopefully the weather will warm up a little bit. We've got the sun thing going. It's now the temperature that we need. So thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Maravich, you do not have any?
We do not have participation on non-agenda items, and I do not have a report.
Perfect.
If I could just add,
You may.
sort of non-Wilson related, but I want to also commend, all the hard work with all the basketball players and the coaches and everyone involved, but I want to commend the Reading School Board for doing the right thing and giving Reading the opportunity to have that win. That is extremely important for our neighboring district to give and provide that, because that almost didn't happen. So, it's very important with all the school boards across Pennsylvania to give the kids an opportunity. So, anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Any other comments or business before the board? Mr. Martin?
Yes, I had 3, but I left 1 at home, so you could get 2 out of 3. I've been receiving various calls about when we're going to get back to school for all students, and I don't understand, is it the state holding us up? What is the issue? Because we talk about mental health, social workers helping this, helping that. Some of these parents, their children are having significant mental issues by staying at home. We need to get the kids back in school. I'm not so much worried. I think you got to have a balance. We're worried about the COVID. Well, it's not going to hurt these kids, and we're worried about them bringing it home. I understand that part too. But the mental aspect of some of these students, their grades have, I know one girl, her mother said her grades she's failing. Last year she was on the honor, now she's failing. This isn't acceptable. What's our plan to get everybody back moving so we get these kids, get this mental issue over and done with?
Excellent question. So I'll start by saying our students, kindergarten through 5th grade, have been in school 5 days a week since August. And we were able to do that by hiring additional teachers to ensure that our classes could appropriately physically distance at least 6 feet, which is currently still a requirement from the Department of Health in Pennsylvania. One of the things that's going to have to change is Pennsylvania is going to have to, in order for us to continue to have the appropriate physical distance at the secondary level, 6 feet as a minimum, we will have to continue in the hybrid model. Now, if the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and the Department of Health with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania decides that the medical personnel agree that now that people have become vaccinated, that they can shift that physical distance from 6 to 3 feet and still maintain the safety issues, then in the Wilson School District in grades 6 through 12, we would be able to bring all of our students that want to come back. Now, there's a lot of conversation at the national level of that shift taking place. There's a study that the CDC is following very closely right now regarding the 6 to 3 feet transition. So the final piece has to do with the requirements through the attestation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that Mr. Hart and I had to sign in order for our students to continue to be able to have the experiences in the extracurriculars. Part of that attestation says that while the Commonwealth or while the county is still in the substantial category, we have to adhere to the requirements as per the Department of Health requirements. Those requirements are very complex, but what I can tell you is that there are thresholds that if you have a certain number of positive cases within the school, secondaries 6, elementary is 4, that you are required to do a short-term closure for a minimum of 3 days. That happened to us today at our high school. We hit the threshold and we had to move and transition to a remote closure for a minimum of 3 days as per the requirements of the Commonwealth. All of those things we've been, as superintendents, making requests of the state to give us additional guidance as we move from substantial to moderate. We believe that the state should give us some additional guidance and direction and maybe lessen the stringent nature of what that encompasses with their rules. So to answer your question finally, we have surveyed, as you know, we have surveyed our senior students, and we believe that we're going to be able to bring our seniors back after the spring break period, back all the seniors that want to come back and still be able to maintain the 6 feet of social distance requirements. I think that's a long way of saying we're going to need a little bit of help and guidance from the state, and the state's going to need to change their rules in order for us to safely bring the kids back, whatever definition of safe is, but the current definition is 6 feet, a minimum of 6 feet of safe physical distance at all times during the course of the school day. Now we're hopeful that we'll see some change moving forward and our students can transition back to more in-person learning. But what we're seeing from districts who have moved from 6 to 3 feet, however they've decided that as their own local decision, what we're seeing and what we're hearing is that because they have done that, anytime that a student comes into contact with another student that has tested positive or test positive, those students will, within that circle or radius will have to quarantine for a minimum number of days. So I think we're doing the best we can in terms of our 6th through 12th grade population. And, part of that is needing to adhere to that 6 feet, because that's what we attested that we would do when we're substantial. But also, the virus hasn't gone away, and we're seeing positives in our school, and we want to make sure that we don't make a rash decision and go into a situation where we have to eliminate students from being able to come to school for a longer period of time. So I hope that addresses it. Long way of saying we need the state to give us some guidance that we can adhere to.
Okay, so I know some schools are doing it in 3 feet, and that's where I get hung up on, because we have 6 feet. We can change our plan and adapt our plan, because we're worried about COVID, but we're not worried about the mental health. I put mental health far above any potential student getting COVID. It's not going to harm that person, and if the parents are older, they have the opportunity to take the shot, or I should say the vaccine, or not. So we're imposing what I believe is arbitrary rules that aren't laws on our situation here.
They're not laws, but they are executive orders which carry the authority of law, however you want to look at it. And I would also say that many of the school systems that have come back to in-person instruction, many of those school systems have not been in person up until January. They've been fully remote K-12. So that's a difference from what we started in Wilson, educating in-person K-5 since August, and having a hybrid model in our secondary level. So our students have been in person, albeit our secondary students have not been in person 5 days a week, but they have been in person.
No, this one is, hold on here. Okay. I've got a concern, and once again, I've been sending emails out last week about the use of our communication systems support political agendas. Whether it's a good for the schools or bad for the schools, we cannot violate the public's trust by pushing an agenda item that is politically oriented. And the reason I'm saying that is I've got a good example here I'm going to give you. There's an organization called Pennsylvanians for Fair Funding. You all know that. It's in a group that every child in Pennsylvania should get X amount of dollars for education. Doesn't matter whether you're born in the inner city or the suburbs, you should get that much funding. So here's some of the things, and I'm just going to read some of this stuff because I didn't make this up. Pennsylvania has the largest gap per student funding of any state between its wealthiest and its poorest districts. This translates into fewer educational opportunities for students, underfunded districts, fewer AP courses, outdated books, limited sports programs, and various other things that impact the student's education overall. Okay, this organization is pushing for a reform that each child gets X amount of dollars. Obviously, a lot of educators are against that, okay? Further, according to the Education Law Center, our funding system underfunds 52% of students in the state. Of those 52%, approximately 8% are people of color. So this is something I think, coming from me, you probably think, there's something wrong with me, but I support this. I think this is a good thing for our community. I think this is great for the education system. You shouldn't matter where you're born. You should have access to the best education possible. A lot of people oppose this. So I would never want to say, okay, this should go out to all the people. That's not my decision. That's a political thing. So I'm really leery about sending out political statements that are from regards to the best interests of the schools or not. We need to keep our communications to boards, policies. If we want a board to make a motion that we support this and that, I don't have a problem with that. But let's not tell people what to do based on a political comment. That's it.
Any other comments or discussion? Other business before the board? Yes.
Coordinated with Mr. Martin, but I've also been thinking about the mental health of our students and faculty, so I wonder if I could just have a little comment here. So this past weekend marked the one-year anniversary of our school's closing due to the COVID pandemic. So I want to take a minute to thank our administrative team, our teachers and support staff for their planning, creativity, and patience that has made this year possible. Wilson has been a leader in our ability to start and maintain in-person learning since August, and I've personally had the opportunity to witness remote learning this year. The ability of our teachers and students to create a classroom community without being physically together has been really amazing to see. And I promised my daughter I wasn't going to cry at that point, so. So while we have seen success, it's tricky. While we have seen success in our classrooms and in the remote learning environment, our teachers and students have also had struggles like everyone else living through this challenging time. As we head into the end of this school year and start to look forward to what next year will look like, I want to make sure that we are focusing on one area that will need the most attention. And that is the mental health concerns of our students and staff as we emerge from the conditions of this pandemic. Tonight, we made a positive step in the right direction by approving the addition of a third social worker to our team, and I hope that we are looking forward to next year to provide our school counselors access to more resources for what is sure to be an increased need. On this topic, if your child or child's friend is struggling during this difficult time, have them reach out to a teacher or school counselor, and that's regardless if they're in person, if they're hybrid, or if they're remote, because our school system is still here for those students. So, like Mr. Martin, the parent that you spoke to, if you were to reach out to them again, I would highly encourage you to tell them to seek the guidance of their school counselor, because they're there to help and they want to help. So there's no magic switch that when a student is put into the classroom, that they're automatically, all of their mental health issues go away. That's not realistic. Obviously, they're going to be able to socialize if they're at home by themselves and their parents are working, and that's a long, boring day. I get it, but it's not school. School may be magic, but school isn't a magic fix for mental health concerns. But if you are concerned that the child is a danger to themselves or others, Pennsylvania has a service called Safe to Say Something, and I believe we have it on our website. And you can leave an anonymous tip that will be sent to our district response team. And just to reiterate, if you or someone that you know needs help, please don't be afraid to reach out. So Wilson has been ahead of the curve in our work to prepare for in-person learning this year, and I have no doubt that we will do the same with the mental health challenges moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Looking for a motion to close the meeting? Mr. Schneider first. Dr. Kennedy second. Meeting is adjourned.